How do we make AI understand the world? Welcome to Flairs, the podcast, a series of conversations with the sponsors of the 2023 edition of Flairs. We're not looking for sales pitches, but for true insights and some good stories. 10 to 15 minutes of healthy food for thought. Who could say no to that? I'm Rogier van der Zwaan. I work for ING. And my guest in this episode is Robert Engels. Robert, he is Vice President and CTIO of Capgemini. And he's heading up the Capgemini AI Futures Lab. Right, Robert?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the show. On LinkedIn, your quote is, "When technology meets people, the fun starts." And that's where I'd want to be.
You like that one, don't you?
I like it. I like it. By the way, we're talking to each other from Zoom. So first question should be, where are you?
I'm in Oslo, in Norway, Scandinavia. As you can see from the view behind me, partly in the woods, on the outskirts of town.
Wow. How did you end up in Oslo?
Yeah, that's a good story. I think I'm born and raised in Amsterdam, but I didn't want to live there. So I actually moved for the first opportunity. And that was when I started to study AI, because it was already very international at that time. So I moved to Stockholm and I fell in love with Scandinavia. So after my PhD in Germany, I came back to Scandinavia.
Yeah, because you've been involved with AI for a long time, right?
Yeah, at the University of Amsterdam, actually, they had studies in the 80s. In 1988, I started to study there at the university. They had the studies called cognitive psychology and artificial intelligence, and that really triggered my fascination.
Yeah.
So I went there on the Routers Island.
Routers, yeah, I studied there as well, by the way. But back in the 80s, what was artificial intelligence, or was it just something that you guys talked about? But didn't really exist yet?
No. There were definitely. The fun fact is that it was before the internet, so that makes it also sound to many people that were born after that it was dinosaurs. But actually, many of the algorithms already did exist. So I mean, in '88 we already had a lot of algorithms for artificial intelligence that could learn, computer implemented, provided you gave it data on a computer that was standalone because there was no internet.
Because what is your definition of AI?
I have been trying to get that definition for 30 years now, with and without beers. And
what's the version with beers? That's most interesting.
Definitely something I want to challenge everybody upon. No, but I think artificial intelligence, let us call it autonomous systems that don't do too stupid things, that understand a bit about the world. And at the moment, we are not there. I mean, there's no real understanding in AI. I mean, there is a lot of autonomous algorithms, and there is a lot of behavior that looks good or even better, but there is no understanding in the human way of understanding things in these algorithms. So I tend to call it interpretation. They do an interpretation of the world and they react to that. And as long as they find the right context, because they're trained on many contexts, of course, and that holds for the old algorithms, the AI algorithms, but also for large language models and generative AI, they're trained on many contexts. And when they go wrong, they call it hallucination in LLMs, or plain errors in normal AI, I would say. It's the same. It's just like a non-interpretation or a wrong interpretation of context. And that's what it's reacting on.
But you've been working on this topic for a very long time, and now since like a year or so, everybody is interested.
Everybody knows what happened, but it was really a shock if you actually try to. I had my own company for 7-8 years because nobody wanted to employ somebody with AI background, because there was no real work. What do you want to do with AI? It was science fiction. So it was always very small projects and POCs, and also in projects with banks, for example, like it was always interesting to talk about AI as an innovation topic. But as soon as the contract came, it was building the ecosystem, building the Basel III integration, building this first, and then we can look at AI. So it was always a bit like that ondergeschoven kindje. So it was a bit second or third order. And then all of a sudden, ChatGPT came, which was a surprise to me. I mean, we were working with GPT-2 and GPT-3 for several years, also with banks. It's mainly with banks actually on a global level, to modernize their software estate. So really get rid of old COBOL and whatever, and do more modern programming languages, replacing software with the help of generative AI. So we were doing that, but nobody was really interested. It was a background job. And then OpenAI managed to combine that with a very open interface on the internet that everybody could use. Mind you, I mean, only 3 months before Midjourney and DALL-E and all that kind of stuff became available, which also was seen, but people couldn't try it themselves because you had to have a Discord access. You needed to learn prompting because it was not as easy as just write a sentence. The results didn't become good from that. So you needed to learn some programming by words, I would say. And that was kind of a limitation. But ChatGPT didn't have all of that. It just started to work straight out of the box with normal sentences. And there was really, really a very low threshold to start. And that made that people started to use it. And then there were effects there, like the tone of voice that they used, and also the character for character printing, that it looked like somebody was typing. All these things made that people really started to trust in it immediately. This was cool. This was working. This was solving all our problems. A bit like that what we had in 2007 when Google started to recognize cats, because that was exactly the same. At that time, the cat recognition of Google would solve all the problems in the world. And so deep learning was the final answer to all the problems we had. Now, it's a bit of the same now with these large language models. Luckily, now after 7 months and a good summer holidays in Europe, you see people start to think again. But it was a bit like, wow, what is happening? You know, like you're always bicycling with wind against you, and then all of a sudden there's a storm from behind. That's really weird.
And the game changer was the interface.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
suddenly it is sort of sexy, easy, and the output is not too bad.
I would say at the moment what we sit with in this first wave of generative AI, I call it the first wave, and it will roll over. I mean, we just survived the first wave. But the first wave, what we will sit with after this first wave is really a new way of having an interaction with the digital world as a human, as human society. So it is comparable with what we had like for 30, 40 years ago. Everybody was working with computers on a command line. So many people were excluded because it was very difficult to work with command line. You had to learn quite a lot. And then Steve Jobs and others came with graphical interfaces with Windows and a mouse. And that actually made that my mother could use it. So it was democratizing the use of a computer now. What you see now is the next step of that. So we take away all that visual stuff as well, and you can just talk with the computer. You can communicate with it in a natural way, and it has extreme multilingual capacities. I've 4 languages in my daily life, and it is really incredible how this system works with bad English or my Dutch English mixed with German and Norwegian. It really interprets correctly what I want, and that I think is really what we sit with after the first wave. There's a lot of work to do in the back end to get this on context interpretation right. There's a lot of capabilities missing in these models. It can't do mathematics, it can't do engineering, it can't do logics, planning, reasoning, abstraction. There's a lot of things missing that we will have to build. And for some of that, we already have solutions from our AI work that we've done the last 40 years. We just have to rediscover them. So there will be a renaissance of the. You see that OpenAI had a renaissance, caused a renaissance of reinforcement learning that is developed in the 90s, and it all of a sudden comes back. Who would have thought that when Google started to recognize cats? So there is a lot of things that we already have done and that we can build on. There is many things that we have to revisit and redo and make better. But I think we have a very good starting point to make this thing really work.
So in a way, now the fun starts.
Yeah.
And everybody is involved, not just one guy in a lab in Oslo.
The democratizing that this thing does, if we really use these interfaces with the speech to text functionality so that you can just speak and interact with it, can you imagine? I mean, all these science fiction movies come to life.
Yeah, which is maybe not the best idea, but like, how do we raise this kid?
Well, not all of them.
No, but it's sort of, yeah, we don't want a Frankenstein. We want a nice, well-behaved new citizen that helps us make this world a better place in a way. So what can we do to raise this kid in the right way?
Yeah, well, we're already realizing, and I think that is a realization that might also be our competitive advantage in Europe, that we are actually human beings dealing with technology, and that we should make sure that we regulate this technology and that we keep it under control. If you do it with an American mindset, with a capitalistic mindset, these organizations get a lot of power. And there is the whole conflict at the moment. On a global basis. It's really, we have regions with social conventions. We call them countries or regions like the EU, and they are really vertical. I mean, all the conventions we do in the EU, they are valid from the EU ground to the sky. And then you have Google and Facebook and all these hyperscalers. They go just like global, and they don't bother about that. So on each and every of these crossings, you have a potential explosion, and that is what we experience at the moment. How do we deal with these orthogonal dimensions of, on the one hand, organizations that just cross borders without bothering about them? And a great example is Elon Musk with the self-driving cars. He just rolled out self-driving and put in a disclaimer that you couldn't use it. But people, of course, used it. In Norway, there were a lot of Teslas, and people started to drive them in the winter, and this system didn't work in the snow. So people got accidents and died. And that is really the way you shouldn't do it.
No.
Now, this is a very dark scenario, but in principle, if you put too much faith in good language without being critical, you will cause the same kind of problems.
So what is your advice then? What should countries do?
No, what we do now in the regional level with the EU, we try to actually find out what does hurt and what is innocent, what can be used and what cannot be used. So I think it's very sensible to make this division in 4 different steps. So that is good. And I think also that we should really have this debate on societal level, where we actually check with each other what we want this technology to be able to do or not.
What can we ask technology to do for us, and what should we keep for ourselves?
Now, I think in principle, as long as we can have confidence in AI and trust in it, so that we know that it's doing what we're asking, it's the alignment problem. As long as we are sure that the AI is doing what we intend it to do, and there is a very small or no chance that it deviates from that and does do stupid things with a large risk. As long as we can secure that, you can do many different tasks. I mean, but we are not there yet. I don't think people want a plane that is built by generative AI. I can't imagine that is what you want at this moment of time. But it might be that in 10 years that these systems are so trustworthy that they can actually build a plane.
In how many years?
10 years or so.
Oh, okay. Well, that's in our lifetimes. What is this stuff that we can leave, that we can ask technology to do for us, and what should we keep for ourselves as humans?
I think in general, you can, in a few years from now, the AI can do a lot. I mean, but you need confidence in AI that it is actually doing what you intended to do. And in the alignment problem, does it really perform the task we wanted to do in the right way? And will it backtrack? Will it stop at the right moment if it goes off track? And we are not there, and we can trust that kind of thing. So you have seen examples of self-driving cars. You have seen examples of stock robots that go berserk and actually flatten the stock market. I mean, they are not smart enough or introspective enough to see that things are not as intended. And this intent topic, how do you bring motivation and intention to machine learning and AI? That is an issue where we have to work on. And what you see with LLMs is that we can steer it a bit. And now we can prompt engineer. That is a steering of where things go.
Yeah.
But we need some real guardrails, like OpenAI and really implemented fixed guardrails. It just refuses to answer if you go into a certain direction. So for 2 years ago, it became racist, these models, if you just let it without any guardrails. Now they just say, sorry, I can't answer that question. We need something in between. And that's not there yet.
That's the way to grow confidence, to provide these boundaries? Let's say this is acceptable and this isn't acceptable.
There's two aspects here. I mean, we talk about artificial intelligence because we have always looked at this kind of computers that do things themselves, or even technology doing things autonomously, as a reflection of our own human being. And that's not necessarily the way to go. I mean, an AI can be something else that is intelligent. It doesn't have to imitate our own behavior, but it should be aligned with it. It should be taking into consideration our feelings, thoughts, emotions, wishes, and intention. I mean, we still want to be on top of it. And that is going to be difficult, of course. The faster this kind of technology gets in interpreting complex relationships between concepts and data and whatever happens, events. So we need some guardrails. And how can we have confidence in AI? What we have done with our Capgemini lab is actually we have worked on that topic. What is confidence in AI? And we dissected it into 12, 13 dimensions. But all these 12, 13 dimensions are necessarily if you really want to have an AI autonomously in a world that is open for them. Now, what we do at the moment, we have algorithms that only, and also the hyperscalers, OpenAI, and you name it, they only tackle 2 or 3 of these 13 dimensions.
Wow.
It's very incomplete. What we do often, if you put, for example, an AI in a factory and building a car, you put just a fence around that part of the factory. So we just exclude the possibility that the other 9 factors, for example, come into play by just refusing people to enter that area or build the robot in a specific way, build some guardrails somehow, physical or software or whatever. So we try to restrict to a few of these dimensions. If we really want to slip them loose in the real world and work with us and for us, then we need to do much more. That is the main message.
Well, loud and clear. But it's like raising a kid before you let it go into the wide world. Yeah, fascinating. We could talk for many more hours, I think, about this topic, but this is more or less what we have time for. So thank you very much, Robert. We'll keep building those guardrails.
And don't forget to further develop the technology.
Also that. But now the fun part starts. So that wraps up this edition of Flairs, the podcast. We have a couple of these kind of conversations all about AI lined up for you on the same platform where you found this one. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and have a lot of fun at Flairs 2023. Bye-bye.